1, 2, 3, 4. Welcome to Crazy Chester. Welcome to Crazy Chester. Crazy Chester's Radio Hour. Welcome to Crazy Chester. Welcome to Crazy Chester. Crazy Chester's Radio Hour. Yeah, Crazy Chester's Radio Hour. Crazy Chester's Radio Hour.
Welcome to the Crazy Chester Radio Hour. My guest today is Steve Trash. Steve is a magician, an ecologist, a musician, I might say, and we'll get to talk about that more. He's based in the Muscle Shoals area of Alabama, where a lot of our music is happening. And most of all, he's one of the most interesting people I know. So I'll make sure I extend
paid
an
him $20
invitation out
to
to
do
you,
that, to
Steve.
say that.
And welcome to the Crazy Chester Radio Hour, Steve.
I'm thrilled to be here. Thanks for having me. And I know that just simply by Steve Trash being here, we are expanding your audience beyond just straight up music, because I could never decide what part of the arts I really loved the most. So it includes music, but maybe that's because I'm from here. We can talk about that. I don't know.
Absolutely. We can explore it a little bit more, but I think the common denominator of all my guests is some sort of connection to music. And I know you have a deep love for music, and you are a musician, even if you might dispute that, but we'll talk about that in a minute. You were born in San Angelo,
Yep,
Texas.
San Angelo, Texas. Yeah, West Texas. Good job.
So, question.
Yes.
It's like, do you have an earlier memory of music or an earlier memory of magic?
Oh, music by a long shot. In fact, part of it is family lore, but part of it is something that I actually remember. I mean, hands down, the first musical artist that I remember is Hank Sr. My mother says when I was 3 in West Texas, we'd be riding along in the crappiest old truck you can imagine. You know, it's held together by rubber bands and tiny pieces of wire. And she said I would just be singing "I Saw the Light" at the top of my lungs, which of course is a Hank Williams Sr. Covered song, or did he cover? He actually wrote it. I don't know, but he owns it in the way he sings it. And I even as a 3-year-old, I adored that song, and it's still one of my favorite. So music is absolutely my first memory.
Yeah, and the way we met was through music, because you decided to make a record or to record a collection of songs that connect to your career as a magician and as somebody who's very much caring for this planet. Right. With a mutual friend of ours, Calvin Hawley, who probably a lot of my listeners might know. If not, he's been with the Amazing Rhythm Aces for the past 20 years. He was Little Richard's lead guitar player and is currently also playing with Peggy Young, who is Neil Young's ex-wife, among many other things, and the session players. But why don't we start there? How did that project originate, and how did you hook up with Calvin?
So I have, I've been a rockin' eco hero for more than 30 years. And that's sort of my made up term for, I teach kids about their connection to nature, to the environment, to the natural world. And that would include simple stuff like recycling or, not creating a lot of litter, just taking care of the planet. And I'm always looking for a new way to connect with audiences that I can share that message. And it occurred to me quite a while ago that I had never really ventured into recorded music. I mean, music is a really big part of my live stage show. But it actually dawned on me when I went to the Tennessee River Muscle Shoals sound, which is now Cypress Moon, and I was dropping a tape off, a videotape for Kelvin's wife. It was a project she was working on. I had some footage she needed. I dropped it off, and Kelvin said, oh, yeah, he was outside taking a break, and he said, we're inside recording. Would you like to come listen? And I was like, I don't, is that okay? I've never been to a recording session before. Yeah, of course. So I walk in, and David Hood is there. I mean, in essence, you've got Kelvin plus the Muscle Shoals sound rhythm section in there. And I was floored by how together they were as they were recording. And they're just making a song up, right? They're just making it up. But they're looking at each other, and they're playing off of each other. And as an inspiration while I'm watching them just make this song up, I thought, I wonder if I couldn't write down some of the things I know about the environment and then have a professional musician, which I'm surrounded by professional musicians, make it sound good. And so I sort of grabbed Kelvin after they laid down that track, and I said, if I wrote some words, would you help me with the music and making it sound good? And he goes, I love it. Let's do it. Just call me. So we did.
And that's the beginning of that project.
Yeah. The beginning of the project that we call the Trash Tunes. Kelvin and I are both really big, huge fans of lots of different genres of music. Although I grew up here in the Shoals, and R&B, that kind of sound, I love. But I really love all the way across. I love from deep country to pop to heavy rock and roll. So I would bring a musical idea in to Kelvin and say, which one of your guitars can you use on this? I mean, we even both are passionate Beatles fans. And I said, Kelvin, that's a sitar over there. Could you play a sitar on one of the songs? And he goes, sure. Nobody ever asks for that guitar. So he, strikes up this really cool George Harrison "Within You, Without You" thing. And in fact, it's one of my favorite songs that we made called Sun Juice, which is about the solar panels that I have in my front yard that make electricity, clean, green electricity.
Yeah, and some of the other titles are the Aluminum Can Blues or the Recycle Flip, Rockin' Eco Heroes. And you guys actually even had a chance to, I guess, back by the Decoys, which is David Hood's band, play those songs live one day. I remember coming to see you here out in the park.
Yeah, they were. Do you know those bucket list items that you have when you're like, well, I should just at least ask if they would look at these songs and learn them. So they said sure, and so yeah, I fronted the Decoys, and it was Kelvin, it was David. Who was on drums that day?
It was Mike Dillon.
Yeah, Dillon was. Yeah, Mike Dillon was on drums. And it was really fun. Frankly, I could have been a lot better because they're all professionals, I'm a professional entertainer. But it was a worthwhile experience, and I loved doing it. So, because when you're with that caliber musician, it's pretty remarkable.
Yeah, and when you do your performance, you have quite an arsenal of interesting tools and objects that you enhance your performance with.
Yeah.
One of them is, if I'm not completely wrong, is a cigar box guitar.
You're 100% correct. In 1980, okay, so I went to school in Florence here in Alabama. I graduated in 1980. Then I went to University of Alabama for a year, and I'm trying to study theater, and I'm trying to study television, and I run out of money, and I come home to Florence, and I graduate with a degree in theater from the University of North Alabama. The day after I graduate, I'm packing my bags, and I move to New York City. 2 days later, I live in New York City on Spring Street in a 5-story walk-up, and I'm poor as a church mouse. So I began my kids' entertainment career as a busker or a street performer because no one would hire me. So I would go to either Central Park, near the Delacorte Clock, near the zoo, or I would go down to Wall Street or South Street Seaport, and I would perform my show, and I would pass the hat. And in the middle to early 80s, New York City was disgustingly dirty, right? There was trash everywhere. And people would bring me trash, and they would hold it up and say, oh, well, if you're an okay magician, why don't you do a trick with this? And if I could do a trick with that, I would pass the hat, and they would give me more money. And it occurred to me, since my stage name was Steve Trash, just like garbage, why not roll that in and try to make the whole theme of the show tie back to this notion that garbage is a natural resource. Natural resources are valuable. And over the arc of my career, just like you said, I've started to incorporate reclaimed object instruments. As an example, a cigar box guitar, or I have a 6-string guitar that's made of a metal gas can that is, it's essentially a dobro, and it's really, really great sounding. And I play those adequately. The truth is, I can play chords, so I open tune it to G and I just bar chord up and down and I look like a rock star, which is really all that's important, just look like a rock star.
Yeah, and now you get to perform all over the country.
Oh, yeah.
Too. How did that career kind of blossom from those very early stages?
For me, it became very obvious when I was a little kid that I would have to be a touring national artist, that I could never make a living staying in Alabama. So like I said, I instantly moved to New York City. I lived there for 5 or 6 years. Then I moved to Los Angeles. By the time I lived in California, I'd already established that I could work lots of different venues. I could work on a college campus, or I could work in a performing arts venue. And I could still live at home because I'm a bit of a country mouse. I like living in the country. I just enjoy it. I've got dogs. My wife loves to live out in the woods. And so I sort of built this metric where Steve Trash could go to where the venue was, knowing that's how I make a living. I mean, for instance, tomorrow I leave for a performing arts venue in northern Michigan. And a week 4 or 5, I've got 2 days, and then I've got a venue down in Orlando, Florida 2 days after that. And then 4 days after that, I'm up at North Carolina in Raleigh. So I studied business to try to figure out how to make myself this little niche thing that I wanted to be, a rock and eco hero.
Yeah. So whenever I work with an artist and an artist is asking me, what is one of the most important talents to have, or of the most important things to do, I almost always say, hey, be unique. Mm-hmm. Because if you're like that other one that's already there, that other person does it longer and probably better. Mm-hmm. So why and how are you unique? Mm-hmm. What would you say? I mean, you're very much unique and cornered that niche really well, what you're doing. So would you agree that being unique as an artist is a huge asset? Yeah,
I would say I agree by a factor of 10. I'll tell you a really quick story. When I was a kid, I looked around. The Shoals has not only does it have a really fine music community, mostly recorded music. Nowadays it's live, but back in the day when I was a kid, it was only recorded music. You couldn't hardly get shot live music-wise. But there was a really good community theater community here, right? And it encouraged me to get on the stage and perform. And really lucky, early in my career, I was probably only about 17 or 18, I went to this magician's convention. And there was a magician's convention there who was very famous. He was a magician at the convention, and the guy's stage name is Mr. Electric, okay? Now, his shtick is and was that he did everything with light bulbs. Okay. Now, he's been on the cover of every Magic magazine. He's been on The Tonight Show. He's been on Jack Parton, Ed Sullivan, all of those old TV shows. So the guy was famous. He knew how to make a living doing this. So I realized, Mr. Electric is going to be at this convention. I need to go talk to him. Because I'm just this snotty-nosed kid from Alabama. I don't even know a professional magician, right? At that point, I don't think I even know any professional musicians, So I corner Mr. Electric and I say, Mr. Electric, I'm willing to work hard. Just what's like the one thing I need to focus on to be a professional magician, a professional entertainer? And he said, that's easy. I'll tell you exactly what you need to know. He said, if the booker out there wants a magician, they literally have thousands of choices. But if they want the guy with the light bulbs, they want me. He said, kid, just go find your light bulb. Right? Now, I'm either 17 or 18, but I'm smart enough to realize that manna from heaven has just been laid in front of me. And what I have to do is go find whatever my light bulb was. So my mom was a teacher. My dad was a forester. I'm passionate about the outdoors. So in the back of my mind, I started thinking, okay, you can't get passionate about something that you're not really into. You can't create an art form around anything that you don't believe in or you don't know anything about. So I thought, okay, I think I know something about this whole recycling environment thing. What if I become that guy? What if my light bulb is the environment? And so I had a little bit of success and a little bit more and a little bit more. And each time I had a little more success, I doubled down on that same thing to make me so unique. Mind you, there are people that can't stand Frank Zappa, right? But Frank Zappa was 100% himself.
Original.
Making
Absolutely.
what he wanted to make. And he was kind of like, if you don't get it, I'm really fine with that. I'm doing this thing that's me and that I need to express. And so for me, I'm always expressing the sort of through line that is environment, ecology, sustainability, care for the people around you, care for the natural world around you. And that runs through all of everything that I do, music-wise. It runs through the magic tricks and, frankly, even the humor on stage.
I guess if there ever was a light bulb moment.
Yeah, right. I had my light bulb moment, and it actually involved light bulbs. That's 100% true. Years later, like 27 years after that happened, I was at auction at the Magic Castle. I'm a member of the Magic Castle in Hollywood, which is like this really, really exclusive magic club. And they had a auction, and they're raising money for a magician's cause. And there was a Mr. Electric light bulb that he had autographed. And I bid a lot of money on that, and it's in my office now because the guy, I was smart enough to pick it up, but he gave me my career. He said just what you said: be unique and make sure that it's true to who you are, because it would feel stale to me to just be a magician or, frankly, even a musician. To me, it gets me excited to share what I know about ecology and the environment with people wherever they are. If it's more of a music thing, I'm happy to do that. If it's more of a magic thing, I'm happy to do that. If it's more of a mystery and comedy thing, I'm happy to do that. It's flowing through me, and they can just pick it up, wherever they find it.
Yeah. So you mentioned the signed light bulb sitting in your office.
Yeah.
And I've never been to your house personally, but your house has been featured in a magazine in a really interesting article. And you are living in the most unique, like if you keep the theme there, house. Tell me a little bit about where you and your wife live.
Well, I'm really lucky that my wife is an ex-hippie, right? So she loves, number one, being frugal, which is another word for cheap. And she's really passionate about the environment. So we live in a 2-story earth-bermed house, which means that the most of the house, it's kind of like a basement, but most of the house on 3 sides is buried underneath the ground. The walls are poured concrete, so they have a really, really heavy thermal mass. The second floor, the actual floor is about 6 inches of poured concrete. Concrete has a tendency to share if it's hot or if it's cold. The earth, if you get down below about 2.5 feet, the earth stays a pretty constant temperature, about 58. So in the summertime, it's hot in Alabama. But if you're down below grade and that concrete will absorb that temperature, it's drawing in the cool temperature of the earth, so you don't have to cool your house as much. And the inverse is true as well. If it's 27 degrees outside, you only have to heat your house up beyond about 58 degrees because you're drawing that in. I also have we've done things over the years to make it as energy efficient and as little impacting as we possibly can. I live in a little community in Alabama called Frog Pond, Alabama. It's a very, very tiny community. It's about 45 minutes or an hour, maybe about 45 minutes south of here. and we have a composting toilet. Excuse me, a composting bathtub in the backyard. So our compost is actually in a little clawfoot bathtub. We use an on-demand water heater because tanks are very wasteful because you're constantly heating water that you're not using. So we use an on-demand water heater. We have the whole south-facing wall of our house. I think it's 22. Maybe more than that, are double pane windows. So during the wintertime, they're deciduous trees and it allows the sunlight in because the sun is lower in the sky and allows that sunlight and heat to come in. During the summertime, those are deciduous trees. So they have leaves. So my house is covered in shade. And they're about 70, 80, I'm going to say about 100 feet in front of the house. I have a 21 panel solar array. So it collects electricity from the sun, takes that electricity and runs it to the house.
Yeah, so you don't just talk it, you walk it.
Well, here's the thing. If you're going to share something with children, don't you think that, number one, you need to know what you're talking
they can
about.
See right through
Oh,
it.
man, the BS, the meters are very good on children. And what I want to do is I want to share what I know about something in a very practical sense. If someone says it's environmental, I'm not necessarily going to buy in. I'm a magician by trade. So I'm naturally skeptical about lots of things. So, for instance, with solar energy, there are really great things and there are not so great things. The not so great things would be in Alabama at 5:01, you're not making any electricity. The sun is down. It cannot generate electricity, and that's not a great thing. On the plus side is from, at my house at least, from about 7:30 to about 4:45, you can make varying degrees, and by make, of course, really all you're doing is collecting energy from the sun, and then it's being converted into electricity. But that conversion is, number one, you're doing it yourself. So if you believe in freedom and liberty and independence, guess what? That if you make your own electricity,
that's about as
that's about as free as you can be. You're making your own electricity. Also, I'm not contributing to any pollution. Once those panels are up and collecting energy, you're not continually adding pollution to the environment. It's essentially clean and green once it's installed and once it's running.
Yeah, that's actually something. My dad is a huge. He has solar panels on the roof, driving an electric car, and it's just like he was a biology teacher.
See, he gets
so
it.
he can, yeah.
Biology people really, they understand their connection to the natural world and how if there is a through line, and your dad probably has multiple ways of expressing this, but if there's a through line to all of the work that I do, it's probably this, that everything in nature is connected at the atomic level, at the chemical level, and at the biologic level. It is inseparable. And so we have to be, I wouldn't say overly concerned, but we have to be aware of the impact we can have on the natural world around us, because if it's all connected, it means that the stuff that you throw out into the natural world will come back. It will come back to you because it's all connected. It's not a metaphor. It's actually a physical reality.
Yeah. And that's hugely important to me too.
Yeah.
Let's circle back to the fact that you're part of this community here in Northwest Alabama, and especially the Muscle Shoals area. How old were you when you moved here?
I was 13, so I moved here in 76. And I'll tell you, the Muscle Shoals sound, when you're a kid, when you're like 12, 13, unless you know one of the professional musicians, the funniest thing is rumors would go around the school. The Rolling Stones are in town, right? Or, Bob Seger's in town, or Paul Simon's. And all the kids would be like, that is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Because why would they come here? This is a pissant nothing town. Well, that's all true. We just weren't connected to that world. I didn't know any of those musicians until much later. And so as I grew up, and I started to be a professional entertainer, and I would come to events that were happening in the Shoals, I started to meet some of these I hesitate to call them local musicians because some of them are quite famous worldwide, but they live here, right? They live here and they record here, and in many cases they record around the world. So I would start to meet them, and to a person, they were so generous with their time and no ego. I mean, that's the one thing you can say about the people that make music here, is they seem to have virtually no ego. Maybe it's because I'm no threat musically to them, but I've not found that. And I'll give you a great example. Kelvin Holly, who you listed off his credits, really early on I said, Kelvin, I'm not an experienced songwriter. I'm just passionate about the environment and know some things about the environment. I'm literally going to lay down some tracks on my cigar box guitar on GarageBand and bring them in. And he said, oh, just stop right there. Stop right there. He said, no one here cares. We just care about the music. No one is going to grade you on some kind of scale that, oh, he doesn't have the chops to be here or not. And I've absolutely found that to be true, is that because I know I'm not a great musician. I love it. And if you give me a choice between practicing a magic trick on my front porch or playing the guitar, I will absolutely be sitting out there playing the guitar. But I know, because I've seen what they can do. I've seen what those really good people can do with a musical instrument. So I know kind of how high that mountain is. But I never once from any of the professionals, and I've hired many of them to come in and do session stuff, at the NuttHouse with Jimmy, because I liked what they brought to it. I mean, you've got Marie Louie, who's a really, she and Cindy are just remarkable with what they can do with their voices. So I wrote a song called Green Lightning, which was about an electric car, about a racing electric car, right? And I thought, I'm hearing it as a rockabilly song. And I need a rockabilly song. I really need women doing backing vocals. And to have them come in and watch them work, I envisioned, and I wrote what I wanted them to sing on the keyboard, right? I was like, well, this is the note that I'm hearing. But they would counterbalance against each other, and make these really interesting sounds I could never have imagined in advance. So it was just nice to let them roll and do their thing. Jimmy Nutt's another good example. Jimmy Nutt is a very talented musician. I mean, he's usually behind behind the board and adjusting knobs and stuff. But I'll say, Jimmy, I have a really great Stratocaster. Would you play a really amazing chord on this, or make something interesting? And he can.
Yeah. So we started this off by talking about the project you did with Kelvin Holly, and what you're referring to now is you did a second project here at the NuttHouse. The album is called The Green Album.
Yeah, The Green. Okay, all right. Let me interject there. It's called The Green Album because, like I said, Kelvin and I were big fans of the Beatles, and the Beatles. My father died when I was 14, very suddenly, very surprising, and the Beatles were sort of there to sort of usher me through some hard times, and so I know. I love everything about the Beatles, and the Beatles, of course, have an album called The White Album because it says nothing but, the Beatles on the front, and it's a double, album. And so I like all genres, and I thought, well, I'm going to try to be cheeky and make an album called The Green Album. And I think Green Day actually has an album called The Green Album too. But, it's not like I'm any kind of competition. I'm a kid's entertainer. So, yeah, so I brought this project into Jimmy. And once again, I had so many different genres that I wanted to goof with. As I brought this in, I kind of treated Jimmy the way I treated Kelvin. I said, look, I have an idea for each individual track. I kind of want it to sound this way. Let's expand on that and just see what it turns into. And I'll even say, you came in with an idea that I never in a million years would have thought about, that the word logical is a part of the word ecological. So I went back and created a song called Ecology is Ecological. See, it's English not being your first language, you probably notice things like that much more easily since we just say it. you know? And then all of a sudden I went, oh my God, of course, ecology, eco is logical. That makes total sense. And so it was fun to go back and write an EDM, you know, a dance song to that theme.
Yeah, and something you mentioned earlier when talking about the music that, you know, like the lack of egos. I always, when people ask me, why are you, you know, in Muscle Shoals, or why did you, you know, come down here? I was just, well, I came here because I fell in love with the music, but I really keep coming back because of the warmth and the welcomeness of the people. That's really something that I think is unique about this, you know, music community here, that it's like they're not just world-class musicians, but they're also real fine human beings.
Yeah, I would agree with that. The all of them are world-class players as well as really decent people. And I lived in L.A. You know, I've seen my share of super egotistical people. And Quincy Jones has there's a Netflix bio out on him right now, and I'm going to paraphrase here, but he basically says, you start with being humble about your creativity and being, what does he use for your success? He says, I can't remember the word, but it basically means, grateful for your success. That you don't need to be a gunslinger about all of the great records that you've played on or how great a musician. The proof is in the pudding. And I think the musicians, or at least my interface with them here, has simply been, hey, sure, let's do that. Come on, let's go do something fun. And, you know, they're real good to invite you to projects that they're working on. Like Kelvin invited me in to listen. And I mean, it's unlikely that I closed my mouth. It was just a gape listening to them jamming there because I was so unused to that, because they were really, really amazing and tight. It was good.
Yeah, and I think they always appreciate what an individual can bring to the table. And in your case, it was something interesting. It might have been something somewhat out of left field, but we're back to unique. You know, it's something Kelvin has never done anything like that before, and that piqued his interest. And I'm sure he had as great a time working on that project as you did.
Yeah. Well, and that's right, because I know what I'm talking about when it comes to children's entertainment. I know what I'm talking about. Interestingly enough, neither one of the CDs that we made, the Trash Tunes or the Green Album, are particularly children's music. Again, I just said, let's make something that we like and that we enjoy. And what I have found is you don't have to make it for kids for them to kind of get the groove. I mean, kids like rockabilly. Even one of the songs was a beatbox. One of my friends, AB, is an amazing beatboxer. So I kind of gave him a few words to hit, and he built a beatbox for us. And Jimmy laid the tracks down, mixed it a little different, you know, put this on top of that, a couple of things. The thing that artists do is they make stuff that didn't exist before. That's all we do. And my feeling is all human beings are creative. If you're a mathematician, you aren't probably painting paintings, but you're creating. You're in your mind making something new that never existed before. If you're an engineer, you're making something new. And I think it is fundamental to human beings that they create. I think it's almost like a life force thing, is that if you're not creating, in essence, I think you're dying, you know? And so I have these periods where I have to bring other people in and stretch myself art form wise. Because, I mean, as you can imagine, it might be very, very embarrassing for someone like me to come in to a recording studio and not be able to play my way out of a paper bag, but have all of these professional musicians around me. But I'm willing to take the chance of looking like a real ass, you know? I'm willing to take that chance, because what I want is this stuff to exist in the world. And if it turns out to be really good, fantastic. If it really sucks, it's totally my fault, right? Because I don't care about that. What I really care about is this music, this idea should exist. Get these creative people to help me make it happen.
Yeah, and I think that's just great way to look at any project. You're using your art also to communicate about, the beauty of this planet and how to take care of it. And there are different musicians that do that. I went to see Jack Johnson, beach folk rocker, this summer. And
you saw him this summer. You saw him on tour this summer.
I
Wow.
saw him in Nashville.
Yeah, I'm
and
a big fan.
I'm a big fan too, but also I very much admire what he does. He makes venues totally abandon like single-use plastics for the show.
Right.
He engages people he has this app where people can collect points when they recycle or learn about local environment, causes,
Right.
stuff like that. It's really good, and
Right.
I think it's just a good example how you can actually turn your kind of the power you have as an artist or as a role model and doing good.
In his case, as a celebrity, because Jack Johnson is well known. I mean, after doing Curious George, the man blew up. I mean, he blew up. And he's gone on to create really good music since then. But I would totally agree with that. And I would say to your listening audience who may not necessarily be environmentalists or avid recyclers, here is what we're going for. No one is trying to tell you how to live your life. What we're trying to do is we're trying to illustrate that human beings exist because the planet exists. Our body is made of the air and the land and the water that surrounds us. It's a system. And so you and I have to actually work with this system to continue to exist. Now, before there were 7 billion people on the planet, it did not matter what we did to the planet because there just weren't enough people to make a long-term difference. But now that we have 7 billion people headed towards 8, probably headed towards maybe 10 or 12 billion people on the planet, and we have the technological ability to do some pretty remarkable things, right? Either good or bad. That's why we need to start flipping this thing where, just like Jack Johnson, we look at how do we interface with the planet? How can we work with natural systems rather than against them, okay? Working against natural systems is simple. It's 2 things. 1, natural systems create no pollution. In nature, waste is food. Just look around you. It's obvious. So don't make pollution. And use resources in a sustainable fashion. That would mean, for instance, water. Water is the principal ingredient in your body. But that water is being recycled over and over and over again by the water cycle. You're not using it up and not returning it. You are actually using it to make your body, and then you're returning it to the system, and then it goes up into the sky, and then it falls down. See, that's a cycle. The same thing's happening with air. You exhale CO2, carbon dioxide. It's absorbed by a plant. That plant absorbs that, basically absorbs it, and then releases oxygen. That comes back to humans. That's a cycle. So the 2 rules for working with nature are straightforward. Don't make pollution. Use resources in sustainable ways. Right? And I see this sort of pivot. That's why I get so excited about this subject, is because I see a pivot where we human beings could actually pivot in this direction because we're clever enough to know, oh, well, there's the North Star, no pollution, and use resources sustainably. That's why, like your dad, I'm excited about electric cars and electricity because virtually everything we use in our home can be powered by the sun or it can be powered by some renewable, sustainable force. I mean, it might even be wave power. Most of the planet is covered by oceans. You know, if we could convert that wave energy into energy that we could use to turn a light bulb on or hook up the amp of an electric guitar, that would be remarkable.
Yeah, I like your term, how we interface with nature. And somebody else who I think does a really great job interfacing with nature is Chuck Leavell, who's the keyboard player for the Rolling Stones.
Right.
And was a member of the Allman Brothers in the 70s. And he says about the Green Album, a wild, wacky, and wonderful eco trip, Mr. Trash has put it all together with cool grooves, clever arrangements, and fun, positive messages. So how do you did you
Boom,
coax?
boom. That's it. I'm talking Chuck Leavell quote for Steve Trash's Green album.
How did he get? Is he a friend of yours? Or how did you get that out of him?
Just through the grapevine of wonderful Muscle Shoals musicians. So we just sort of attracted through. Actually, Scott hooked me up because they had been roommates.
Scott Boyer.
Yeah. Had actually they'd been roommates about 1,000 years ago, and he said, I think I could. I think I got his number here somewhere. Let me see. And, he texted him. But that was really nice of Chuck to do that. And Chuck's a passionate. He and his wife own a. It's basically a sustainable tree harvesting company in Georgia.
Yeah, and
as well as being a professional musician.
And his website is quite a resource for green themes too.
Well, here's the thing. There are lots of little bitty choices you can make to make a lesser impact. But the question that you just ask yourself is this a good? Like, there's such a big deal about plastics right now because plastics they're largely being discarded, and many of them are ending up in the ocean, or they're breaking into tiny little pieces. The real question you have to ask yourself when you're trying to use a resource is, does it make pollution, and can it be sustainably used? Right? Those are the principle. People say go back to first principles. Those are first principles when it comes to the natural world. I mean, we want easy rules like, well, can I use a plastic straw or not? But it's more complicated than that. And so what you want to do is you want to go back to those ideas. Does it make pollution, or can it be sustainably used? And then you'll get your answer. You'll get your answer of that. And I do see human beings like Chuck, and he's an impressive guy. I see us pivoting in that direction as humanity, because that's where we need to go, because everybody wants clean air and land and water, and we want to use the natural gifts that the planet gives us that, by the way, we do nothing for. I mean, if you inhale really clean oxygen, you literally did nothing to make that oxygen. You literally did nothing to make the water that makes up your body. So the tiniest possible thing you could do would be to protect those resources, right? To work sustainably with natural systems, so the spaceship that is Spaceship Earth keeps continuing in a good trajectory, and all of the spacemen and spacewomen that are riding on the spaceship get to have, a happy voyage.
Absolutely. And you're continuing to spread that message too with a very exciting project that's about to launch.
Yep.
Can you tell me a little bit about that?
I'd love to tell you about that. And music will be very much a part of that. The new project is I've partnered with Alabama Public Television. Now, I'm partnered with Alabama Public Television to produce this, but it will go nationwide. It'll be through the NEDA network, which is an educators network, and the content will be made available to all public television stations across the nation. I know you're in Nashville, so Nashville Public Television will have access to this actually for free. The project is called Steve Trash Science, and for 11 minutes each Saturday morning, I will take on one science idea. And it could be something as simple as biomes, or it could be something as complicated as digital literacy. If it fits into the science, technology, engineering, and math milieu, that means that I'm going to do something on it. And we have really amazing subjects. I mean, soil, for instance, for farmers. Soil is a fascinating subject. Now, you think it's dirt, right? Most people think, it's just dirt, it's just mud. No. It's a living ecosystem, soil is. So we'll launch into explaining what soil is in magical and funny ways. In fact, the premise of the show is magic is creating the illusion you can defy the laws of nature. Science is the study of how the natural world works. So I'll always open always open Steve Trash Science with a really amazing magic trick, right? To get sort of hook people in and say, now remember, that's just an illusion. I'm not actually doing what I just showed you. But the flip side of that is, let's dig into the science of soil, or let's dig into the science of solar energy, or let's dig into the science of ecosystems. And it'll be very funny. The title, the sort of slogan is Real Science, Real Funny. because I want it to be very enjoyable. It's not going to be like class at all.
Yeah, well, and I look forward to seeing that, and I wish you just the best of luck with it too.
Thank you.
We're here about at the end of our conversation, and I sure and truly appreciate you being here, just being great how you always are, and spending those past 45 minutes with me.
Well, it was a pleasure. When you invited me, I was like, yippee, let's go. Let's talk, let's talk music. And to your listeners, Andreas is a remarkable guy. I'm constantly commenting him about you were born in Switzerland, right? His English is so fantastic. I love language, right? And so I'm always like listening, trying to tell where people are from, if it's regional or if it's a dialect from somewhere else. And there were good questions, and I very much enjoyed myself today. And I'm gonna have to go learn something about Switzerland because I feel ignorant. I should know something about Switzerland, something.
Well, you certainly don't have to. But I wish
yeah, but I will, though.
All right. Well, and I wish you a safe trip tomorrow. And,
thank you. Yeah, headed up to Michigan tomorrow.
And a great start with your new adventure on public television. And hopefully another fun musical project sometime.
We are already working on new projects. We might make this one a little more kid-centric. I do have to pick times when the professional musicians are around, though. And I try to find times when they're not on tour or when they're not in the studio with some big recording artist. And that happens fairly often. They're in the studio with somebody big, and I don't want to get in the way. I just want us to be relaxed and have a project that's easy for everybody, and they come in for a few hours and they make me look and sound a lot better than I really am.
Yeah, well, that sounds like a great plan. So best of luck to you.
Thank you very much.
This was the 38th episode of the Crazy Chester Radio Hour. If you'd like to find out more about Steve Tresh, go to his website at stevetresh.com. If you like this episode, please make sure to check out some of our earlier episodes with more great musicians, songwriters, producers, and other music-related individuals. Also, make sure to subscribe to the Crazy Chester Radio Hour podcast on iTunes, TuneIn, or Stitcher, or you can also listen to the podcast over at YouTube and SoundCloud. That's it for today. Thanks for listening. See you next time.